Hi, it's Conor Svensson here, founder and CEO of Web3 Labs. This is a conversation I had with Min Kim, founder of the Icon Network. Icon is one of the leading aggregator blockchains, providing interoperability across multiple chains via its blockchain transmission protocol, BTP. In our discussion, we cover how the landscape has changed for Web3 companies wanting to raise funding since the Icon's successful ICO back in 2017, why interoperability is so important for blockchains, and some of the big things happening in Icon this year, including their recently announced $200 million ecosystem fund and upcoming ICE network launch. Prior to founding the Icon Network, Min has worn multiple hats, having worked in the banking and technology sector as well as being an entrepreneur. Given his professional background, I'm sure you'll find our conversation fascinating with plenty of insights. Hey, Min, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show today.
Well, I'm very happy to be here and finally talk to you in person. Heard a lot about you.
Oh, thank you. Well, just let's get straight into it on Icon. Now, the network it was launched back in 2017. It was back when there was a lot of ICOs happening, but Icon itself has been one of the success stories from that time in terms of it was always a technology platform that had clear ambitions around interoperability. Um, let's how do you feel things are now in 2022 compared with where we were when you first created the project and wrote the white paper and did the initial raise?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has changed. However, a lot has not either. So I think there's still both pros and cons of the direction of the industry and where we're going. When Icon started, obviously, I would say everything was a very beginning, meaning that there weren't much infrastructure built. I remember when we looked into technology like Ethereum, or back then, there were only a few for us to look into. There was IBM's Hyperledger. We don't hear that anymore. R3 Corda. Corda's still around, but it's still, relatively quieter than what it used to be. So I think back in the day when we started off, the technology itself was very raw, which led us to want to contribute very heavily on the technology side. So I think aside from, you know, the difference between us and many of the current projects that you see today is that I think a lot of the projects are focused more on the business side of things, building applications that actually are on top of a lot of the infrastructure that was built by teams like us and others. So there's a lot more tangible products that people are playing with, such as DeFi or NFT space. But way back in the days, um, well, it's only been like 4 years, but feels like so long ago. We started out as a technology project, and we're still very heavily focused on technology. So I think that means we are a bit different from a few of the other projects that you see today. But the industry has evolved quite a bit to a point. As I mentioned, we're seeing some interesting use cases and development from all this. So we're very proud to be a contributor to the movement of the industry.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see how much it sort of has exploded, especially in the last 12 months with the ups and more recently downs associated with it. Um, but you're someone who came from a finance and technology heavy background before you even got involved with blockchain, and so how do you feel that background influenced your thinking? Because I know from what I've heard anyway, in the early days there was the Icon Loop company, and I don't know all of the details, obviously, about how Icon came from that. But you were working with enterprises early on, thinking about how this blockchain and Web3 type technologies could be relevant for them.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the technology and entrepreneurial background, I think it helped me think through the future of the financial system that we are so accustomed to. And the frustration that I had to deal with personally as a startup founder, just navigating through the banking system and setting up entities around the world, making investments around the world, signing, contracts, and just being from the financial background, and working on initial public offerings for large technology companies, working on mergers and acquisitions, working on governance or corporate governance, corporate finance. A lot of these involve heavy, contracts, and that takes a lot of time and effort. And then, what would very influenced me quite a bit back in 2017 was, the simplicity and the efficiency of fundraising through token sales, such as the initial coin offerings. And once I participated in one of those and saw how ICOs were basically the first use cases of smart contracts, and I became a believer that this was a paradigm shift, and it influenced me a lot to give my life to to this industry, and try to make a positive impact, to moving forward. What I see to be a new world of finance. So I do believe wholeheartedly that digital assets and some, not every, but some of the things that we're seeing from the decentralized finance space are going to be this, a stepping stone towards something that is even greater in the financial system.
Yeah, and so in your case, it was very much so this, having been involved firsthand with these transactions for companies and so on, you could see, naturally how
Right.
the model with ICOs was, well, very a very nice way of simplifying that. And as if we think about how that's kind of evolved, and more recently, you've got, say, platforms like CoinList, you've got these IDOs and so on and so forth. Do you think that that sort of approach that a lot of newer projects are using for fundraising these days, that's kind of going to be the new standard, where you have these kind of platforms that do this? Or do you think we could get back to a place where it is, you almost have the simplicity of the ICO, where firms have that degree of autonomy to be able to raise funds, because it feels like because there was such an influx of projects trying to raise funds that way, that it became a lot harder for investors to know which ones were serious and legitimate. And people have all heard about the scams and so on. But do you think we could get back to that purer model?
That's a very interesting question. I do believe that in order for the entire fundraising to evolve, I do think we need to take a step back and go back into the regulatory framework that has worked for something like IPOs. Of course, IPOs are more restricted and limited to select investors or institutional investors, which is, I think a lot of people disagree with, and I personally disagree as well. I think many people do have the ability to make their own choices. So the whole concept of accredited investors needs to be changed, obviously, for the benefit. And I do believe we are moving towards that change. But once, I think it's more of a problem, I think, of the definition of accredited investors that needs to change than the fundraising process. So I do think there's a lot of value in platforms like CoinList, where makes things a lot more efficient. It gives a lot of trust and reliability to the fundraising process, where we've experienced a lot of scams, as you mentioned, and removing and these the scams and all of that, and making the process a lot more dependable and trustworthy. I think that's very, very important, and that would help the change, or make the entire process evolve into something greater. On top of that, we've been obviously seeing more interesting forms of token fundraising, I would say, which is now that we have very efficient decentralized exchanges, you don't necessarily need to, or project teams don't necessarily need to do a fundraise. You could, launch a token to give majority of that tokens to the users, and where the initial team keeps a small portion of it. I think something like, we've seen plenty of those models recently, and I think the ICE blockchain is a part of that. The other that interesting models that we've seen include, I think it was called Gala games, where you don't really necessarily do fundraising, where you create tokens or you sell tokens, but you sell the license to do node operator. So I think it's questionable that you could say that such model is a public blockchain. It's more of a hand selected, like I think it's more of a proof of authority type of blockchain. But at the very least, you have hundreds of buyers of these validator nodes and licenses, and a team could try to do fundraising in a different way. So I do think fundraising models continue to evolve, and depending on the industry and the type of risk the team is willing to take, it could evolve into something interesting. So, and then I think we're starting to see that today, and that's something that we've been keeping an eye on.
And you certainly raise a very key point there as well, in terms of trying to find ways in which you can get the existing financial legislation to support these sorts of more innovative approaches. Because I think as people who have worked in that industry, we appreciate firsthand that so much of this stuff is there for a reason, and it's evolved over many, many years. Not always getting as updated as frequently as it should do, but by the same token, the end result is ultimately about protecting people, and
Right.
There's good reasons, of course, for that.
Right.
And so with respect to then the sorts of use cases, as you pointed out about how the different models have kind of evolved, especially with what's happened recently with DAOs and them creating a lot of rewards for their users.
Mm-hmm.
And no doubt you've mentioned DeFi more broadly and NFTs. Are there other specific use cases or areas that are less spoken about, or that you're very excited about, that you think that we're going to see more growth, or you'd like to see more growth in?
Yes, I mean, I think we're just touching the surface for the NFT side. So I think we've all seen, um, some very interesting products, such as NBA Top Shots, or just evolvement from the Crypto Kitty days. So now we're starting to see some, crypto punks could be used for potentially games. There are gaming companies that are trying to create these metaverses where NFTs could be used and traded. There's very interesting experiments like the loot box, um, trying to do different things with NFTs, right? So I think the space is still in the experimentation phase, where we just made an announcement yesterday where we are partnering with a gaming company in Korea to explore interoperability with NFTs. So again, I think this whole space is, we're just scratching the surface, and we're trying to explore the possibilities. And I think the next few years is going to be quite interesting, and we'll see what kind of new innovations will come out from that. But I do think, to answer your question, I think NFT space is continually evolving, and we'll see more larger gaming companies coming in, exploring the space, and we're already seeing that today. The DeFi space, I do think is quite early, but as well, we've seen some interesting, governance tokens that's been given out. Started by Compound and Aave, and we're seeing, different new chains trying to up their TVL by, enticing with incentive programs, and all of that. So it's going quite interesting right now how I think everyone's observing how this entire you know industry will evolve. And I know for a fact that all the big banks are and security firms are looking at this and keeping a close eye on the entire DeFi space. They're very, they're still learning. I would say I'm actually have a call today with a large security companies in Korea to help them educate about DeFi space. So these are kind of the things I do to help the industry move forward. But yeah, I mean, everyone's keeping an eye on this, how it's evolving. They think it's very interesting. Um, Feels, in terms of the technology, it's quite new, but the conceptually, being able to lock or use digital assets as a collateral to take out loans for and purchase for you to use and purchase other things. And the concept of that hasn't changed since sort of the human history began, right? It's a very simple concept of similar to a pawn shop where you take something valuable and then you deposit that to borrow money. And we're doing that in the digital world. And conceptually, we're still super early, and you see how centralized finance today has evolved into something like so much more complex that even most humans don't understand how the financial system today works because there are all these derivatives and complex, tools and systems that help people make different, bets. Like to get from what we see today from in the DeFi world to building smart contracts that you see that could power like centralized financial systems of I think that journey is going to be extremely interesting.
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that one. With NFTs, like the scope of where they could be applied is just it's phenomenal, right? How they could just be almost absolutely anything. And I think when you start talking to people, especially in the corporate world, and things like whether it's legal agreements or other things like that, you could have NFTs to represent these sorts of concepts. It's just so wide, the opportunities for impact, and really all we're seeing right now is like the kind of the profile pics, the the
Yeah.
fun NFTs, but there's like that bigger picture thing is massive, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I do think like it's yeah overall NFTs. I think we're all confined to just thinking about artwork, but NFTs could be digital representation of anything, not just artwork. I think artwork is just easier because we all know that art has value. We see it every day. We could easily, it's very tangible. You could pick an art and just feel like that, owning a piece of it is very valuable. So I think art is probably the simplest to get into. But, um, I think the future of how the NFTs could be used and what other ways it could be, combined with even DeFi to be able to, I think, a lot of people say using your NFTs as a collateral to take out loans. That conceptually is very interesting, but we'll see how how these things will evolve in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly on the DeFi front, do you think that over time the way that the broader adoption will happen is through more centralized platforms like, say, Binance, Coinbase? I mean, one can argue, of course, that Binance already is like more widely used than any blockchain itself, so it's kind of already in that position. But certainly with Coinbase wanting to offer DeFi products to consumers and create those rails, do you feel like that's going to be the way that it happens, with people seeing these innovations, but then they would need access through more sort of trusted sources, so to speak? Or do you think that it will get to a point where people are kind of digitally native enough with respect to this Web3 technology that they can almost interact more directly with these rails in the same way that right now a lot of speculators do, but there's quite high barriers to entry?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and it's something I've been thinking about. I am torn. quite a bit. I do see a lot of value in centralized services or centralized exchanges. Obviously, today it makes everything a lot simpler um, and faster. So I think using DeFi products still today is very clunky and it's scary, and I wouldn't recommend my friends to use DeFi unless they are more familiar with and educated in tech. So there's pros and cons, and but the future is going to be very interesting. Where I do think there needs to be significant infrastructure changes in order for decentralized anything could evolve. Um, you know, most of the blockchains today, they're all highly reliant on AWS servers, and which is a centralized service, um, a service, meaning that if AWS decides to shut down all these validators, then everyone we won't have too many blockchains that will be remaining other than Bitcoin. So I do think the future of how things could evolve and how these DeFi services like decentralized exchanges could um, you know level up is we do need some significant changes at the infrastructure level, and even like domain names or even being able to do things with IPFS. I think changes things a lot, but IPFS obviously is not as efficient as centralized services. So yeah, I think everything just is very very we're kind of interested how things will evolve, because we all know that the regulators are looking into DeFi space, and they're not accepting governance or decentralized governance as the pure reason to not be regulated or not to regulate these DeFi projects. So I do think regulators are coming. There will be more tougher milestones or days ahead of us in lobbying in the Capitol Hill to try to um, bring greater innovation while letting DeFi play on its own. But I think it's going to be a struggle to work with these governments or regulators, and we see that in places like Korea already, where basically at one point South Korea had more than I believe like 200 exchanges. Um, during the first boom back in 2018. And then just through licensing or just permission, now there are only top 4 exchanges that are allowed to do business in South Korea. So how they control that is they cut off the fiat withdrawals for Korean wons from the bank accounts. 2, now what they're doing is, South Korea is known to have very heavy control with capital. After the Asian tiger crisis back in the days, the capital control is a very very important issue for the government. The government never wants to go through the Asia, the Asian crisis ever again. So they're still controlling capital that goes out of the country, which means these exchanges today are now required to KYC wallets that of accounts that's where the money goes. So you can only it's yeah, I think all these public exchanges are not allowing you to send money to, DeFi wallets, for example, because DeFi wallets are not KYC wallets. So if you have a Binance wallet that is KYC, you can send your money to that wallet, but you need to be able to provide documentation that shows that these wallet addresses are KYC'd wallets from other exchanges, or else you can't send it. So you're starting to see these heavy-handed actions by regulators to, curb the industry, and we'll see how other countries or regulators will follow. But just seeing some of these movements, and it's not. I think it could be seen as both ways. It could be seen as positive or negative. We won't see the craziness that you see, like the Wild Wild West type of actions today, but it does build more trust in the system. Once regulation comes into place, so it's always the question of like how do you balance that. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear more about how it is in South Korea. Because do you spend your time between the US and South Korea? Because I know that from your history, there's been
Yeah.
sort of involvements and initiatives in both places.
Yeah. I mean, I used to. Pre-pandemic. So
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, I used to go 3-4 times a year. Spend a lot of time doing meetings, and we have contractors and tech team in Korea. So I spent quite a bit of time in Korea, but post pandemic, obviously, I haven't been back for a couple of years right now. So I'm itching to get back at some point once the whole quarantine situation and all of that resolves. So yeah, we'll see how hopefully an end comes. Yeah.
And so from the regulation perspective, in 2022, the anticipation is there's going to start being a bit more inroads being made in the US. But I mean, contrasting that with South Korea, as you were saying, there's some very tight capital controls about money flowing in and out of the country.
Right.
But comparing the two, just I guess for my own benefit and people listening too, is it sort of a generally quite a crypto friendly place as long as the funds aren't flowing out the country?
Um, I think it's quite interesting where the sentiments around crypto has changed in the past 6 months, with two presidential candidates openly supporting blockchain and cryptocurrency. So I think at a very high level is a very positive thing. But
Yeah.
the question is like, how does that translate to actual, actions, or what's going to come out of it is going to be the next question. So the presidential, you know, we will know which Korean president, who will be the president in, I think, March, or yeah, in a few months. So we'll wait probably a few months after, or maybe a couple of years after. We'll see how government or these presidents react to cryptocurrencies. So, but on the other hand, what people have to understand is that there's different hands or different government bodies react differently to cryptocurrency. So, outside of the president's office, you have separate power, separate departments such as the FSC, the financial regulators, who are obviously pushing these exchanges to follow rules and guidelines that they set. The other part, big question I think everyone asks is like, hey man, like, has the institutional money come into crypto in South Korea? And the answer is no. And how the financial regulators are controlling that today is um, they're not allowing licensed financial institutions uh, to get involved with crypto. Meaning you can't even invest in cryptocurrencies or hold any cryptocurrencies on your balance sheets. So,
Mm.
so these large financial banks, they can't buy Bitcoin and hold it in their balance sheet. And all these financial institutions are, recently announced various digital assets custody service. And if you look at CoinDesk or Cointelegraph, articles, and you type in some of the largest banks in Korea, they're all preparing to provide digital asset custody services, but they can't launch it because the financial regulators won't allow it today. So all these systems are prepared, tech is there, but they just haven't gotten the green light to start doing business around digital currencies or even purchase digital currency. So, I think that's a bull case where in the next few years, that green light will come and these financial institutions will start buying digital assets. The other part is how the Korea venture capital or private equity system works is that in Korea, Korea has one of the largest, pension funds in the world. I think it's like top five after, Singapore. I think Ontario. I think the Canada has a large one, but Korea has um, a large pension fund that is government controlled. And from this fund is where a lot of the investments go into in supporting the venture capital and private equity industry in South Korea. Meaning, majority of these funds in Korea are, taking money from the government to be invested in to invest into, cryptocurrencies and things like that. So there's a lot of question marks right now where if you touch government money, you are um, you know you have to take more conservative approach when it comes to investing in cryptocurrencies and blockchain. These are more seen as speculative, so a lot of these money cannot go into these type of blockchain industry and supporting these industries. So you know, it's quite interesting how the dynamics work. So it's not currently in our favor, honestly. And there are other, you know, interesting factors such as the Korean IRS, which is the NTS, is cracking down on cryptocurrency projects and going after founders, and I think those are other kind of developments, which is driving talent and founders out to other countries such as Singapore. Singapore single-handedly is the biggest beneficiary of some of these screwed up policies set by the Korean regulators and tax policies that you see today. And you know, like a lot of people probably don't know this outside of Korea, but some of the biggest names are now physically relocating and building teams outside of Korea, in Singapore, and they're setting up entities outside of Korea, and they're sending people, employees, to live in Singapore because of the crypto environment is not very favorable in Korea. So, again, they're driving capital, money, and talent to Singapore. And Singapore is going to be a huge beneficiary due to this, I think, screw up that we see from regulators and people, that policymakers in South Korea today.
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear those parallels, because certainly in the US market as well, although it is more supportive of, I guess, the institutional perspective, there's still a lot of very frustrated founders there who are concerned about how slow the regulation's been to come in, and the issues that US citizens face in terms of being able to participate in purchasing cryptocurrencies via certain mechanisms is of significant concern. I remember hearing an impassioned plea by Naval Ravikant and Chris Dixon. I think it was on one of Tim Ferriss's shows to that exact point. So it is funny when you have both the US and South Korea, which are renowned for being very technologically savvy nations in terms of what they're producing that there's kind of this level of catch up. So let's move back to Icon, because I know we've kind of discussed around the edges and
Yes.
so on, but I think it's important as well to, of course, go a bit deeper there. Now, the vision always with the beginning with Icon was around the sort of connectivity with blockchains, and a key component of that has been the BTP protocol for providing that, and certainly BTP2 was I think it was announced last year, but we've of course been doing work with that as well. And there's a number of different networks and protocols that are being supported there. I believe Moonbeam is close now, BSC and Near as well, and Harmony is too. But BTP more generally was. At what point did that become like a key thing for you? Because there was the network obviously got spun up, and people started participating in the governance and running the infrastructure there. But then BTP's taken a it's a significant thing that's kind of come together and been focused on. And is that we'll get onto ICE shortly as well, but is that kind of always been quite a big focus for you?
Yeah, I mean, we have obviously a separate team that is highly focused on the technology aspect of things, but at a very high level, I would very honestly say the whole DeFi space has driven this, need for, cross-chain or bridging or interoperability between these different chains, trying to bring assets from, especially Ethereum, blockchains over to their own blockchain to increase their TVL and try to increase usage and things like that. So it's a way of trying to bring steal users or bring users into your own platforms, which is quite interesting. Very honestly, I think beginning of last year or even like 2 years ago, I think it's not just us, but I think many of the original, you know, I think interoperability protocols, did not see the cross-chain world or multi-chain world coming so quickly, and that kind of is a lesson that once there's a simple use case such as DeFi, where cross-chain, assets are needed, then yeah, I mean things move relatively quickly. So, but the bigger surprise for me was how the entire industry is completely okay with using centralized bridges, which is quite interesting. So, the whole movement was sort of started by BitGo in providing WBTC on Ethereum chain so that WBTC could be used for, some of the DeFi protocols, that was quite interesting, very interesting use case. But, WBTC, the whole concept of it is brilliant, but at the same time, it's interesting how, the entire philosophy of blockchain and decentralization is something that's we're working towards, but everyone is so ready to accept very simple solutions, simple centralized solutions, right? So it's in a way it is quite disheartening, but I do believe that in the long run, we all have to go towards a decentralized model, and Icon is one of the very few projects that has been committed from the very beginning, that has an architecture that's working, and we have something that is very difficult to build, that is ready to launch quite soon. So yeah, I mean I think we're taking the right steps, but obviously I think the community and this crypto world always likes to see something that's working, and they don't care if it's centralized or decentralized as long as something works. I think that gets a lot of the attention. So I think that's just a sad reality, honestly. But I guess it is what it is. In the crypto world, it's that's how it's played. But yeah, I mean, it's the same question of like centralized exchanges versus decentralized exchanges. I guess there's a lot of value in centralized exchanges still today. So which puts a lot of value in these like centralized bridges. So yeah, I mean, there's probably a market or demand for both in the future. I'm still, our team is still thinking through this, and I do think it'll be an interesting future. So yeah, we'll see how everything kind of plays out. I do think this whole concept of do we need something like USDC, a centralized stablecoin, versus a decentralized stablecoin like like DAI or balanced dollars is quite interesting. And I think the public right now just don't seem to care too much. But we'll see how things play out in the next few years. And I'm sure there's going to be more incidences or something happening in the industry where people could gravitate towards a decentralized bridge versus a centralized bridge, or vice versa. So we'll see how everything turns out.
So it's the classic thing. Once people have had a good run and there's times pass by without any significant failures, then they'll stay with it. But with these, it does feel like a big part of the whole Web3 vision is about finding these real opportunities for decentralization as much as possible in these key infrastructure layers. Like to your point earlier on about too much being run on top of Amazon Web Services, it's thinking about all those parts of the stack that can provide that additional resilience that's going to help the narrative play out properly.
Yeah, hopefully.
And so last year, the Icon Foundation announced the ICE network, and the ICE network, for listeners, of course, who aren't familiar with it, is a Ethereum compatible new blockchain network that's being launched. What was kind of the motivations for kicking off this project?
Yeah, very good question. So we always believe that the future is multi-chain, and we love working on our own technology and building our own chain. And as I mentioned from the very beginning, we have been very heavily technology focused, and you know, I think we learn a lot by just building the technology ourselves from the bottoms up, which a lot of the other projects don't even attempt to because it's that difficult, right? And it's arguably, I think people question if do you really need to, but I think there's a lot of value in just the experience and the learning that you get that is not measured by just dollars, but it's very valuable to build your own chain. But last year, one of our teammates came up, had this idea of being able to start the ICE blockchain that's EVM compatible, and um, being able to work with the Polkadot ecosystem, and using Polkadot SDK to do these things. And we thought it was a very interesting concept, and we liked the idea of trying something new, trying something very different. I do believe, you know, it's learning is the most important fact that could be very valuable for our team. So, and sometimes you just get bogged down into building your own technology that you don't really understand what else is out there. And we looked into some of the other options, and we thought, an ICE blockchain would be very interesting. We believe there are experiments that we're doing right now, and where, how do we, you know, increase the value of, the utility of ICX. And we're baking that into the ICE blockchain, where ICX will have value because of the ICE blockchain network, and ICE blockchain network will have a value because now it's a part of a larger Polkadot network, and it's EVM compatible, and you'll be able to bring in new applications that will work with the ICE with the Icon blockchain as well. So I think what we're envisioning and what we're picturing is something that could be done in parallel, but it gives a lot of value to the current Icon community as well.
Yeah, and of course, like the opportunity for experimentation as well, and to find new ways to kind of build things that wouldn't have been possible as quickly before, because there's such a broad ecosystem on Ethereum. Just being able to capitalize on that, no doubt, will help with the innovation angle there too. So something else that was announced a couple of weeks ago was there's a $200 million
Right.
interoperability incentive program. Tell us more about this, because that's a big number in terms of for an ecosystem fund, and it's really great to see it, of course, because of this is the sort of stuff that technical teams and technologists can really get involved in and provide some great
Right.
opportunities to build
So
out
I
new
think one thing to
infrastructure.
make it clear is that, you know, from the very beginning of this project, if you look into our white paper, we do have a reserve set for um, something like this. So, um, we've allocated about 16% of the tokens from the, early days of from the ICO days, or the token generation event back in 2017. And that money, we've always meant it to be put into the community functions that could be used for to power BTP. So, um, that's exactly what we're doing. Um, it's not the money that I'm providing you. It's not something that I can't, in a sense, it's like, yes, you know, it's something that the foundation supports, and we've announced it, and but it's actually where it's the community's money that we're putting towards the community. So, there's nothing, people shouldn't be too surprised or, you know, about it, but it's quite exciting, in my opinion, that, we've created we designed a program that is specifically for a BTP use case and to incentivize, cross chain. And it's the first time that anyone is doing this. Most of the incentive programs that you see today are basically meant to, steal users from other networks to bring in more, total value locked to your DeFi platform. But in our case, we believe our program is much more, um, complementary to other chains, where we're trying to incentivize other chains to use BTP, and we don't care where the assets go. Um, for example, we don't care if the ICX flows into Harmony or Moonbeam. Like, just the fact that, you know assets gets transferred or bridged to other networks, and BTP powers that, creates fees and uses between these networks, and that is the purpose of BTP. So we're excited to, try to empower um, that kind of action and use case through this incentive program.
Yeah, so it's really cool to see, and especially as you point out the difference with many other incentive programs, which are all about land grabs, so to speak, in terms of how you come, to bring your project onto our protocol. So just to wrap up here, Min, if people want to follow you or keep up to date, what's the best way to engage with you? Is it via Twitter,
Very
LinkedIn?
good question.
What mediums do you like?
I mean, probably Twitter is the simplest, because even when I'm not keeping an eye out, everyone on my team, we have dedicated people, committee managers, who are keeping an eye out in the Twitter space to make sure that important messages, or I answer key questions. But yeah, I mean, it's I try to be available as much as possible, as much as my time permits. So uh, unfortunately, I probably don't have as much spare time to hang out on Twitter as many other crypto founders that you see today. They're much younger, have more free time. I'm a family man, and and I have a lot of other commitments.
I hear you.
All icon related, obviously, but there's a lot of meetings and happening on my daily schedule. So I try to fit in as much as possible to the community. But yeah, I mean, uh, you know, I think that's like very long winded answer, but yes, I'm available on Twitter. So feel free to drop me a message. I do go through them like maybe once or twice a day. But I do want to say, there's a lot of questions thrown at my way, a lot of people DMing me and questioning. It's very difficult for me to look through all of them. But, if you have like a very, very good question, feel free to, try to make the question very constructive and, and very thoughtful. I think these type of questions I love to answer and get to people, not, silly questions. I mean, obviously it's very difficult for me to spend time answering those.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to hear though that you're still looking out for the good signal among the noise. And so your handle, it's
Yes.
Minter Chain. Yeah. And Icon is Hello Icon World as well. So for listeners, certainly they're both accounts well worth following. And Icon's got a very active community too. So there's regular updates in terms of what's happening there. Min, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and looking forward to
Very
the
excited
ICE
about
network
ice.
launch
Very
later
excited
this
about
year.
snow. I mean, we have a lot of great things happening in our ecosystem. I do think, again, I do think that the big part is that we keep building. We have great partners like Web3 Labs, focused on growing our ecosystem, and I think I think a lot of people are scared that we're going into another bear market, but Icon, we survived our first bear market compared to a lot of the other projects out there that just 99% of 2017 projects are now dead and not operating. We're still here. We're still kicking. We're ready for another bear market. We'll still be here. We'll still be building. So, we're building Icon to last, right? The older the chain is, I think people should put more trust in it because, we've survived. We've been here. We're going to continue to be here. The core team will continue to build. So I think people have more faith in what we've been doing, and the fact that we've been around since 2017 is a positive thing, not a negative thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's all about playing the long
Great.
game.
All right. Thank
Hi,
you.
Min. Yeah, speak soon. Cheers. Hi, it's Conor Svensson here again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm really excited to share with you that I've written a book, The Blockchain Innovators Handbook, a leader's guide to understanding, adopting and succeeding with this disruptive technology. I've been wanting to share my learnings about blockchain and Web3 for a number of years with a wider audience, and I'm really excited that I can do this now. This book covers everything from the fundamentals of the technology through to opportunity identification and implementation for your business to ensure that you can be one of the big beneficiaries of the wider transition to Web3 that's taking place now. The book is available in physical as well as digital form. For more information, head to web3labs.com/innovators.